The three others exchanged grim glances. They knew the risks, Keetak said finally, his voice softening slightly. And they would want us to complete the mission, not risk the evidence we've gathered in a rescue attempt. Elora's 4 eyes blinked rapidly as emotion threatened to overwhelm her. But he's right, Dr. Ndidi said gently. The best way to help them now is to expose Maxoth's plan and rally support against him. With enough evidence and political pressure, we might be able to force a negotiation for their release. The sound of approaching security teams echoed down the corridor they'd just traversed. Kowalski took up a defensive position at the entrance, her weapon ready. "Whatever we're doing, we need to do it now," she called. "We've got company coming." Dr. Ndidi activated her communicator. "Admiral, we're at Extraction Point Delta. We have the data, but the diplomatic team has been captured, requesting immediate evacuation and diversionary tactics." "Understood," came Admiral Blackwell's steady voice. "Diversion commencing in 3, 2, 1. The facility shuddered as distant explosions echoed through its structure. Alarms changed pitch, and the security teams in the corridor could be heard redirecting to deal with this new threat. "Now," Dr. Ndidi ordered. Keetak hit the final sequence, and the outer airlock door slid open, exposing them to the moon's thin atmosphere. Emergency force fields activated, creating a breathable tunnel that extended out from the hatch. Through the swirling dust kicked up by the explosions, Elora could make out a dark shape descending rapidly toward them. A second human shuttle, smaller and sleeker than the one they'd arrived in. "Go, go, go!" Kowalski urged, covering their retreat as they moved toward the approaching vessel. The shuttle executed a perfect alignment with the force field tunnel, its own airlock opening to receive them. They piled in, Kowalski diving through last as weapons fire from a newly arrived security team lanced through the space she'd just occupied. The shuttle detached and accelerated away from the facility with stomach-churning speed. Through the viewport, Elora could see human ships engaging the facility's defensive systems, creating enough chaos to cover their escape without causing catastrophic damage. As they rocketed toward the Intrepid, Elora clutched the data spike containing Maxoth's files. If what she'd read was correct, the conspiracy went far deeper than any of them had imagined, and humanity itself was divided on whether to save the galaxy or transcend it. "Your infiltration team has been quite impressive," Maxoth remarked conversationally to Captain Drelks, as they watched the surveillance feeds showing the ongoing battle outside the facility. "The humans especially. Their technology has advanced even further than I anticipated." They had been moved to Maxoth's private command center deep within the facility, where the High Counselor seemed content to let them witness the unfolding chaos. Captain Drelks and her team were restrained but otherwise unharmed, though the captain harbored no illusions about their long-term prospects. "If you've been manipulating humanity for centuries, why are they fighting against you now?" Dr. Varix asked, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her fear. Maxoth sighed, the sound somehow both ancient and weary. "Evolution is never a linear process, Doctor. There are always divergences. Some humans embraced my vision of transcendence. Others clung to their biological limitations, their quaint notions of preserving the physical realm." He gestured to a different screen, showing the pulsating dimensional aperture. "What they fail to understand is that this is the natural progression of all intelligent life. The physical universe is merely an incubator, a temporary stage in our development. What lies beyond is our true destiny." "And the trillions of beings who aren't ready for this transcendence?" Captain Drelks challenged. "You're proposing to end their existence without consent." "Consent?" Maxoth actually laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Did the single-celled organisms of your world consent to becoming multicellular? Did fish consent to developing lungs and walking on land? Evolution doesn't ask permission, Captain." "This isn't evolution," Zaktal argued, his scientific training evident in his precise rebuttal. "It's extinction masked as ascension." Maxoth regarded him with something almost like respect. A narrow perspective, but an understandable one. You cannot conceive of existence beyond your current form. Few can. That's why leadership requires vision, and occasionally, difficult decisions. A notification chimed on one of the screens. Maxoth checked it, his expression darkening slightly. "It seems your archivist and her human companions have escaped with some rather sensitive data," he said, his tone casual despite the obvious setback. "No matter, they're too late to stop what's already in motion." He touched a control panel, and the image of the dimensional aperture expanded to fill the main view screen. "Observe, Captain, the culmination of 7 centuries of preparation." The aperture was pulsating more rapidly now, its edges growing less distinct as it seemed to spread outward. Scientists worked frantically around it, adjusting equipment and monitoring readings. "What are you doing?" Captain Drelks demanded, a sense of dread filling her. "Accelerating the inevitable," Maxoth replied simply. "Your infiltration team's escape has forced my hand. The aperture will now reach critical expansion within hours rather than days." "You're going to kill everyone!" Zaktal shouted, straining against his restraints. Maxoth turned to him, his ancient eyes filled with something like pity. "No, young scientist. I'm going to save everyone. The chosen will transcend with me. The rest will be reborn in whatever new universe forms after this one collapses. The cycle continues, as it always has." Captain Drelks exchanged horrified glances with her crew. Maxoth wasn't just insane, he was operating on a scale of megalomania that transcended conventional understanding. And unless Alora and the infiltration team could somehow turn the data they'd stolen into immediate action, there would be no stopping him. Aboard the Intrepid, Admiral Blackwell studied the data with an expression of grim determination. Around the briefing table sat the infiltration team, along with the ship's senior staff and representatives from the other human vessels. "It's worse than we thought," he finally said, looking up from the holographic display. "Maxoth isn't building a weapon. He's creating an artificial vacuum collapse that will consume the entire galaxy, possibly the universe." "A what?" Alora asked, still struggling to grasp the full implications of what she'd discovered. Commander Winters stepped in to explain. "Imagine reality as a bubble of stable space-time. What Maxoth is doing is puncturing that bubble and systematically weakening its surface tension. Once it reaches critical instability—" "Pop," Lieutenant Kowalski finished grimly. "And he believes this will allow him to transcend to some higher plane of existence?" Dr. Nandidi asked, her scientific skepticism evident. "According to his research, yes," the Admiral confirmed. "He's convinced that consciousness can survive the collapse and reform in whatever dimension or universe exists beyond or after ours." "He's insane," Alora stated flatly. "Insane but methodical," Admiral Blackwell corrected. "And he's had 700 years to perfect his approach. These files confirm he was behind the original cataclysm that devastated Earth. It was his first attempt at creating a dimensional aperture, but he couldn't control it." "The files also mentioned humans working with him," Alora said hesitantly, glancing at Dr. Ndidi. "Is that true?" A heavy silence fell over the room. The Admiral's expression hardened. "Yes," he finally admitted. "Not all of humanity agreed on how to respond to the cataclysm. Most wanted to prevent it from ever happening again. But some, a small but influential faction, were seduced by Maxoth's vision of transcendence. They believed humanity had reached its biological limits and that the next stage of evolution lay beyond physical existence." "The division," Lieutenant Commander Keetak murmured. "It's not just a myth." Admiral Blackwell nodded grimly. "For centuries we've fought a secret war within our own ranks. Those loyal to Earth and the protection of all life, and those who follow Maxoth's path. Until recently, we've managed to keep them in check, limit their influence. But in the past few decades, they've grown stronger, more organized." "So, some of your fleet," Alora began, the implications dawning on her. "Are not entirely loyal to me, yes," the Admiral confirmed. "I trust my immediate crew implicitly, but several captains have shown concerning tendencies. Now that we know Maxoth has accelerated his timeline, we must assume they'll make their move soon." "We need to stop the aperture from expanding," Dr. Ndidi said firmly, bringing the conversation back to the immediate threat. "According to these readings, it's already growing at an exponential rate. We have hours, maybe less." "Can it be done?" Alora asked, looking from face to face around the table. "Theoretically, yes," Commander Winters replied. "The aperture relies on a precise energy matrix to maintain its expansion. Disrupt that matrix, and it should collapse back in on itself." "Should?" Lieutenant Kowalski raised an eyebrow. "It's not an exact science," Winters admitted. "We're dealing with forces that exist at the boundary of our understanding. But the alternative is certain annihilation, so—" Admiral Blackwell stood, his decision made. "Commander Winters, work with Dr. Ndidi to develop a countermeasure. Lieutenant Kowalski, prepare a strike team. We'll need to get back into that facility and reach the aperture control systems." "What about Captain Drelks and the others?" Alora asked, unwilling to abandon her captain and crewmates. The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "Their rescue will be part of the mission, but I won't lie to you, Archivist. The aperture must be our priority. Trillions of lives depend on it." Alora nodded, understanding the impossible weight of such decisions. "Then I'm going with the strike team." Absolutely not, Keetak immediately objected. You're not trained for combat. No, but I'm the only one who can access council systems without triggering security protocols, she countered. And I know exactly where the data we need will be stored. After a moment's consideration, Admiral Blackwell nodded. She's right. Alora goes with the strike team. He turned to address the entire group. We have one chance to stop this. One chance to save everything and everyone we've ever known. As they dispersed to prepare for the mission, Alora found herself standing beside Dr. Ndidi at the viewport. Below them, the moon facility glowed against the darkness of space, a deceptively ordinary sight for something that threatened all existence. Do you think we can really stop it? She asked quietly. Dr. Ndidi's expression was solemn but determined. Humans have a saying, where there's life, there's hope. And right now, we're fighting for all life everywhere. She placed a hand on Alora's shoulder. So yes, we'll stop it. Because we must. The strike force assembled in the Intrepid's main hangar bay. 20 human soldiers in advanced combat gear. Lieutenant Commander Keetak, Lieutenant Kowalski, and, somewhat incongruously among the warriors, Alora. Admiral Blackwell addressed them from a raised platform, his voice carrying effortlessly across the cavernous space. You all know the stakes. This isn't just about saving our planets or our species. It's about preserving the very fabric of existence itself. He activated a holographic display showing the facility and their insertion points. Team Alpha, led by Lieutenant Kowalski, will create a diversion at the main research complex. Team Beta, under Lieutenant Commander Keetak, will infiltrate the command center to locate and rescue Captain Drelks and her crew. The Admiral turned to Alora. And you, Archivist, will accompany me and Team Gamma to the Aperture control room. Once there, you'll access the systems while we deploy Dr. Ndidi's countermeasure device. Alora blinked in surprise. You're coming with us, Admiral? Some missions are too important to delegate, he replied simply. Besides, I have unfinished business with Maxoth. As the teams performed final equipment checks, Dr. Ndidi approached with what looked like a small metallic sphere. This is the disruptor, she explained, handing it to the Admiral. It needs to be placed directly within the control matrix of the Aperture. Once activated, it will generate a cascading quantum interference pattern that should, in theory, collapse the Aperture back to a stable singularity. In theory, the Admiral repeated with a tight smile. It's the best we could do in 2 hours, Dr. Ndidi replied with a shrug. But the science is sound. The tricky part will be getting it into position and synchronized with their systems. That's where I come in, Alora said, with more confidence than she felt. Exactly. Dr. Ndidi squeezed her shoulder encouragingly. I'd be going with you, but I need to monitor the quantum fluctuations from here and guide you through the final calibrations. A warning klaxon sounded, signaling 5 minutes until departure. The strike teams moved toward their respective shuttles, sleek, black vessels designed for stealth and speed. Admiral Blackwell took a moment to address a final concern. Be aware that we may face resistance not just from Maxoth's forces, but potentially from our own kind. If any human tries to impede this mission, consider them compromised and act accordingly. The grim reality of their situation settled over the group. They weren't just fighting an external threat, but an ideological schism that cut across species lines. What Maxoth offered, transcendence beyond physical limitations, was a temptation that had seduced beings throughout the galaxy. As Alora boarded the shuttle with Team Gamma, she found herself wondering if she would ever see her homeworld again. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, it filled her with a strange sense of purpose. Whatever happened in the next few hours would determine the fate of everything she had ever known or loved. For the first time in her life, the Archivist wasn't just recording history. She was helping to shape it. The human fleet is dividing, announced one of Maxoth's aides, his voice betraying a hint of anxiety. 3 vessels have broken formation and are moving to intercept our reinforcements. The remainder appear to be preparing for another assault on our defenses. Maxoth observed the tactical display with the calm detachment of someone who had seen countless battles over his long existence. As expected, Admiral Blackwell is nothing if not predictable in his heroics. Captain Drelks, still restrained but watching the proceedings with keen attention, seized on this information. You know him personally, don't you? Oh yes, Maxoth replied, seemingly happy to elaborate. The Admiral and I have played this game many times over the centuries, though never quite so directly. His family line has opposed mine since the original cataclysm. His great-grandfather led the faction that rejected transcendence in favor of biological persistence, a short-sighted choice, but an understandable one from beings with such limited lifespans. And yet they've managed to thwart you for 700 years, Dr. Varix pointed out, unable to resist the verbal jab. Maxoth's expression hardened momentarily before settling back into its usual mask of superiority. Delayed, Doctor, not thwarted. And what are 7 centuries to a being who has lived for millennia? A minor inconvenience, nothing more. A new alarm sounded, this one more urgent than the perimeter warnings. Multiple breaches detected, called another aide. Security forces reporting coordinated attacks at Research Complex Alpha and the Eastern Quadrant. A diversion, Maxoth said dismissively. Increase security around the aperture control room and my private laboratory. That's where they'll make their real move. As the command center erupted into activity, Zektal leaned toward Captain Drelks. They're coming for us, he whispered, hope evident in his voice despite his effort to conceal it. Yes, she replied softly, but I'm more concerned about what Blackwell intends to do about the aperture. If Maxoth has accelerated the expansion process, then stopping it may no longer be possible. Dr. Varix finished, her scientific mind already calculating the probabilities. It would require a countermeasure of equal or greater power, which could potentially cause an immediate collapse rather than a controlled shutdown. Captain Drelks' tentacles twisted with concern. Either way, we need to be ready to move when the opportunity presents itself. Zikatal, can you reach the emergency release on your restraints? The Jindari scientist subtly tested his bonds. Almost. Give me a few more minutes. Maxoth, who had been issuing orders to his security forces, suddenly turned back to them. I wouldn't waste your energy on escape attempts, Captain. Even if your friends somehow manage to reach us, it's already too late. The aperture has reached Stage 3 expansion. Nothing can stop it now. As if to emphasize his point, the facility shuddered slightly, the lights flickering as power was diverted to the massive energy requirements of the growing dimensional tear. What happens at Stage 3? Dr. Varix asked, scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her fear. Maxoth's smile was chilling in its serenity. Reality begins to flex. The boundaries between what is and what could be become more permeable. You'll witness wonders beyond comprehension in the coming hours, at least until your consciousness is either absorbed into the new state of being or extinguished entirely. And you can't control which outcome awaits each individual, can you? Captain Drelks realized, her military training allowing her to spot the flaw in his plan. You're not saving anyone. You're gambling with the entire universe on the slim chance that your own consciousness will survive transcendence. For the first time, Maxoth's composure slipped slightly. The worthy will transcend, he insisted. Those whose minds are prepared, whose consciousness has been properly aligned. Aligned to what? Zakatal demanded. Your specific frequency of insanity? Before Maxoth could respond, an explosion rocked the command center, the blast doors buckling inward as the distinctive sound of human weapons echoed from the corridor beyond. It seems our visitors have arrived, Maxoth said, his composure instantly restored. Let us welcome them properly. Team Gamma encountered surprisingly light resistance as they made their way toward the aperture control room. Admiral Blackwell led from the front, his movements displaying a lifetime of military training despite his age and rank. This is too easy, he muttered as they secured another junction. Maxoth knows we're coming. He should have this area locked down tight. Alora, keeping close to the center of the group as instructed, shared his concern. Maybe the diversion is working better than expected. Or he wants us to reach the aperture, the Admiral replied grimly. Stay alert, everyone. This could be a trap. They continued through the facility, dispatching the occasional security team with precision and minimal force. The human soldiers used weapons that incapacitated rather than killed, a moral choice that impressed Alora despite the dire circumstances. As they approached the final security checkpoint before the aperture control room, Admiral Blackwell raised his fist, signaling the team to halt. Ahead, the corridor was completely empty. No guards, no automated defenses. Definitely a trap, he confirmed, his expression hardening. Sergeant Wells, take point with the scanner. Let's see what we're dealing with. A soldier stepped forward, deploying a device that emitted a series of pulses down the corridor. The readings appeared on her wrist display. No conventional explosives or energy weapons, sir, but I'm detecting some kind of anomaly ahead. The scanner can't identify it. The Admiral nodded as if this confirmed his suspicions. Reality distortions. The aperture's influence is spreading faster than we anticipated. He turned to Alora. This changes things. The control room may already be compromised by the space-time fluctuations. We need to go directly to the aperture itself. But the disruptor needs to be synchronized with their control systems, Alora protested. Dr. Ndidi said it wouldn't work otherwise. We'll have to adapt, the Admiral replied, his voice grim but determined. The aperture itself must have its own localized control matrix. If we can access that directly, we might still have a chance. He tapped his communicator. Blackwell to Ndidi. The control room approach is compromised. We're going to attempt direct intervention at the aperture. Can the disruptor be modified for direct application? After a moment of static, Dr. Ndidi's voice came through, tense but clear. Possible, but extremely risky. The quantum fluctuations at the aperture boundary will interfere with the calibration sequence. Someone would need to manually adjust it during deployment. Understood. Send the modified protocols to Alora's datapad. Blackwell out. He turned to the archivist. This just got more complicated. Are you still with us? Alora's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, her species equivalent of a deep breath. Do I have a choice? The Admiral's expression softened momentarily. There's always a choice. I could send you back with an escort. And miss witnessing the pivotal moment in galactic history? She managed a nervous flutter of her wings. What kind of archivist would I be? This earned her a brief smile from the Admiral before his professional demeanor returned. All right, team. New objective. We breach the main research chamber, secure the aperture perimeter, and deploy the disruptor directly. Expect heavy resistance and unusual conditions. They moved forward cautiously, bypassing the empty corridor by cutting through a maintenance shaft that Lieutenant Wells discovered. As they progressed deeper into the facility, the environment began to change subtly. Shadows seemed to move independently of their sources. Occasional flickers in the air, like heat distortions, rippled through solid objects. Most disturbing of all, sounds sometimes preceded their causes. They heard footsteps before boots touched the floor, voices before mouths opened. Reality distortions, the Admiral explained, noticing Alora's mounting distress. Time and space becoming less fixed. Focus on your breathing and your immediate surroundings. Don't look too closely at the anomalies. Finally, they reached a viewing gallery overlooking the main research chamber. Below them stretched a vast, circular room dominated by the aperture. A pulsating tear in the fabric of reality that seemed to both exist and not exist simultaneously. It no longer resembled the relatively contained phenomenon Alora had glimpsed earlier. Now it billowed and twisted, its edges constantly shifting as it consumed more of the physical space around it. Scientists and technicians worked frantically at various stations surrounding the anomaly, their movements becoming increasingly erratic as the distortions affected them. Some appeared to move in slow motion, others at impossible speeds. A few seemed to be in multiple places at once. There, the Admiral pointed to a raised platform near the aperture where a complex array of equipment was clustered. That's the primary stabilization matrix. If we can reach it, we can deploy the disruptor directly into the energy stream. Alora studied the chamber, her archivist's training, allowing her to quickly analyze the layout. There's an access stairway on the far side. Less personnel, better cover. Good eye. The Admiral nodded approvingly. Team, we'll descend in 2 groups. First group creates a perimeter. Second group escorts Alora to the stabilization matrix. Use non-lethal force whenever possible. Most of these people are just scientists doing their jobs. They moved into position, waiting for the Admiral's signal. Alora's datapad chimed softly as Dr. Ndidi's modified protocols arrived. She reviewed them quickly, her anxiety mounting as she realized just how precise the timing would need to be. Ready? Admiral Blackwell asked, his hand on her shoulder. Alora clutched the disruptor device to her chest and nodded. As I'll ever be. The Admiral gave the signal and chaos erupted. Team Beta, led by Lieutenant Commander Keetak, encountered significantly more resistance than expected as they fought their way toward the command center. The Phyrexian veteran had expected Maxoth to prioritize protecting the aperture, not his own position, which suggested the High Counselor knew something they didn't. Push forward, Keetak ordered as they cleared another security checkpoint. Captain Drelks and her team must be extracted before the aperture situation deteriorates further. Lieutenant Kowalski, who had insisted on joining Team Beta despite her original assignment, took point with ruthless efficiency. Command center perimeter in sight. Heavy opposition ahead. Indeed, the approaches to Maxoth's command center were bristling with security forces. Both standard council guards and specialized combat units Keetak recognized as the High Counselor's personal elite. They were heavily armed and clearly prepared for a significant assault. Standard approach won't work, Keetak assessed quickly. We need a diversion. Kowalski grinned, patting a specialized device attached to her combat harness. Way ahead of you, Commander. Quantum displacement charge. Creates a localized spatial distortion that draws attention without causing structural damage. Will it work with the existing reality fluctuations? Keetak asked, eyeing the occasional ripples in the air that indicated the aperture's influence was spreading. Only one way to find out, she replied, already calibrating the device. You might want to secure any loose items. This can get unpredictable. As the strike team took cover, Kowalski activated the device and hurled it toward the opposite side of the command center perimeter. For a moment, nothing happened. Then reality itself seemed to hiccup. The air rippled, folded, and suddenly all sounds in that area were amplified thousandfold. Footsteps became thunderclaps. Whispered communications became deafening shouts. The security forces, disoriented and alarmed, converged on the disturbance. Now, Keetak ordered, leading the team forward into the temporarily undermanned approach. They breached the outer defenses easily, but as they reached the command center's blast doors, they encountered unexpected resistance. Not from Maxoth's guards, but from a group of humans in adapted council security uniforms. Traitors, Kowalski spat, recognizing the insignia that marked them as members of the Transcendence faction. Stand down, Lieutenant, their leader called. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. Join us. Transcendence is humanity's destiny. Humanity's destiny is to survive and thrive as we are, she retorted, her weapon steady. Not to be consumed by some cosmic woodchipper because an ancient alien has a god complex. Negotiations deteriorated rapidly after that. Inside the command center, the sounds of battle echoed from both approaches. Maxoth observed the tactical displays with growing irritation as his carefully laid plans began to fray at the edges. It seems your friends are quite determined, he remarked to Captain Drelks, who had managed to work one tentacle partially free from her restraints. Particularly the humans. Such a stubborn species. You misjudged them, Drelks replied, continuing her subtle efforts to escape. You thought 700 years of manipulation would bend them all to your vision, but you forgot something fundamental about humans. And what might that be? Maxoth asked, genuinely curious despite the circumstances. They're contrary by nature, Zikatal interjected with a flutter of his wings. Tell a human something is impossible, and they'll devote their lives to proving you wrong. Tell them they should transcend their physical forms, and they'll cling to their biology out of sheer spite. A rare look of uncertainty crossed Maxoth's ancient face. Perhaps, but it no longer matters. The aperture has reached stage 4 expansion. Soon, the dimensional barriers will collapse entirely, and choice will become irrelevant. As if to emphasize his point, the command center suddenly warped, the walls briefly becoming transparent before snapping back to solidity. Equipment flickered between states of repair and disrepair. One of Maxoth's aides cried out as his arm momentarily phased through a control panel. It's accelerating, Dr. Varax observed, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. The distortions are becoming more pronounced. Maxoth nodded, a look of almost religious ecstasy on his face. The boundaries thin. Soon we will see beyond the veil. Those who are prepared will transcend. Those who are not. He shrugged, the gesture strangely casual given the stakes. A deafening explosion interrupted his pontification as the main blast doors buckled inward. Through the smoke and debris, Captain Drelks could make out the familiar figure of Lieutenant Commander Keetak leading a strike team into the command center. Secure the prisoners, he ordered, his scarred face set in grim determination as he traded fire with Maxoth's guards. In the confusion, Captain Drelks finally wrenched her primary tentacles free, and immediately began helping Zektal and Dr. Varax. Move to the extraction team when I give the signal, she instructed quietly. What about you? Zekatal asked, his wings quivering with tension. I'm going after Maxoth, she replied, watching as the High Counselor retreated toward a concealed door at the rear of the command center. He's the only one who truly understands how the aperture works. We may need him to stop it. Before her crew could protest, Captain Drelks surged forward, her powerful tentacles lashing out to incapacitate 2 guards blocking her path. Years of military training took over as she moved with surprising speed and precision for her species, closing the distance to Maxoth as he reached the hidden exit. Going somewhere, Counselor? She called, her voice cutting through the chaos of the ongoing battle. Maxoth turned, his ancient eyes widening slightly in surprise. Captain Drelks, your tenacity is admirable, if futile. He gestured, and reality itself seemed to warp between them. creating a barrier of distorted space-time. But I'm afraid our paths must diverge here. I have a transcendence to oversee. There won't be any transcendence, she retorted, cautiously testing the barrier with one tentacle and pulling back as it caused painful distortions. Admiral Blackwell is deploying a quantum disruptor directly into the aperture as we speak. For the first time, genuine alarm flashed across Maxoth's face. Impossible! A direct deployment would... He stopped himself, suddenly wary. You're bluffing. Am I? Captain Drelks used the momentary distraction to scan the area, spotting a maintenance conduit that might bypass the barrier. The Admiral seemed quite confident. Something about humans having worked on countermeasures for 700 years, just in case someone like you ever tried this again. Maxoth's composure cracked further. He wouldn't dare. A disruptor at this stage would cause an instantaneous collapse. The energy release would destroy half the system. Better half a system than the entire universe, Captain Drelks replied, edging toward the conduit. That's the difference between you and humans, Counselor. They understand sacrifice. With that, she lunged for the maintenance access, her tentacles punching through the thin covering. Maxoth realized her intention too late, firing some kind of energy weapon that scorched the wall where she had been moments before. Captain Drelks squeezed her flexible body into the narrow space, navigating by instinct as she pursued the fleeing Counselor. Behind her, the sounds of battle began to fade, suggesting Kitak's team was gaining the upper hand. She only hoped Admiral Blackwell was having similar success with the aperture. If not, none of their efforts would matter. The main research chamber had descended into chaos. Reality itself seemed to be unraveling around the expanding aperture, creating conditions that defied conventional physics. Objects existed in multiple states simultaneously. Gravity fluctuated wildly, causing equipment and personnel to float momentarily before crashing back down. Through this maelstrom, Admiral Blackwell led his team with unwavering focus, establishing a secure perimeter around the stabilization matrix as Alora worked frantically to interface the disruptor with the alien technology. Hurry, the Admiral urged, deflecting bizarre energy arcs with a specialized shield. The aperture is approaching critical mass. Alora's 4 eyes darted between her datapad and the complex array of equipment. The modified protocols from Dr. Ndidi were clear enough, but the axiom systems kept shifting between states, making the connection process maddening. I'm trying, she called back, her wings fluttering with stress. The interface keeps changing. It's like trying to hit a moving target while riding a gravity wave. Around them, the strike team held position against increasing resistance, not just from security forces, but from the very fabric of reality. Some soldiers found themselves briefly out of phase with normal spacetime, becoming ghostly apparitions before snapping back to solidity. Others experienced time at different rates, their movements accelerating or slowing unpredictably. Admiral, Sergeant Wells called urgently. We've got incoming, and they're not standard security. Approaching through the distortions came a group of humans wearing the insignia of the Transcendence faction, led by a tall, austere woman whose uniform marked her as a ship captain. Admiral Blackwell, she called, her voice somehow cutting through the chaos. Stand down, you're interfering with humanity's destiny. The Admiral's expression hardened. Captain Reynolds, I suspected you might have been turned. Humanity's destiny isn't to be consumed by an alien's megalomania. You're so limited in your thinking, Reynolds replied, her face alight with fervent belief. Maxoth has shown us the truth. Physical existence is merely a larval stage. What lies beyond is true freedom. What lies beyond is oblivion, Blackwell countered, positioning himself between Reynolds and Alora. Don't do this, Catherine. We served together for 20 years. And now I serve a higher purpose. She signaled her team to spread out. One last chance, Admiral. Join us in transcendence, or die clinging to your obsolete form. The standoff escalated rapidly, both sides taking positions as the reality distortions intensified around them. Elora, half listening to the confrontation while working desperately on the disruptor interface, finally achieved a stable connection. Admiral, she called. I've got it, but the calibration sequence needs at least 2 minutes to complete. You heard her, Blackwell told his team. 2 minutes. Hold this position at all costs. What followed was unlike any battle Elora had ever witnessed or read about in the archives. As the two human factions engaged, the unstable reality around them turned every action into a surreal tableau of physics gone mad. Weapons fire traveled in impossible curves. Combatants phased in and out of normal spacetime. In some areas, the same sequence of fighting repeated in endless loops. In others, effects preceded their causes. Through it all, Admiral Blackwell stood firm, a fixed point in the swirling chaos, defending Allura and the Disruptor with grim determination. Captain Reynolds and her team pressed their attack with the fervor of true believers, willing to die for their chance at transcendence. 1 minute remaining, Allura called, monitoring the calibration sequence. The Disruptor hummed with increasing intensity, its quantum field beginning to interact with the aperture's energy matrix. Suddenly, a new distortion rippled through the chamber, and High Counselor Maxoth himself emerged from a side entrance, pursued closely by Captain Drelks. The counselor's normally composed demeanor had given way to frantic urgency as he assessed the situation. "Stop them!" he commanded, his voice carrying unnatural power. "The Disruptor will destroy everything." 30 seconds, Allura announced, her wings vibrating with tension. Captain Reynolds redoubled her efforts, personally engaging Admiral Blackwell in hand-to-hand combat as her team pushed toward the stabilization matrix. The Admiral fought with the skill of decades of experience, but Reynolds was younger, enhanced by technologies developed during humanity's long isolation. "It's over, Daniel," she said as she gained the upper hand, forcing the Admiral to his knees. "Accept the inevitable." "Humanity has never been good at accepting the inevitable," Blackwell replied through gritted teeth. Then, with a sudden surge of strength, he executed a countermove that sent Reynolds staggering back. "We prefer to make our own destiny." 10 seconds, Allura called, her finger poised over the activation control. Maxoth, seeing the imminent deployment of the Disruptor, abandoned all pretense of dignity. "You fools! You'll doom us all!" He raised a device of his own, some kind of quantum stabilizer, and fired at the Disruptor. Captain Drelks, in a final desperate lunge, wrapped her tentacles around the High Counselor, disrupting his aim. The energy beam went wide, striking the aperture itself instead of the Disruptor. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The aperture's rhythmic pulsations became erratic, its boundaries fluctuating wildly. The reality distortions throughout the chamber intensified exponentially. "Now, Allura," Admiral Blackwell shouted over the mounting chaos. "Activate it now!" Allura slammed her hand down on the control, and the Disruptor surged to life, projecting a concentrated beam of quantum energy directly into the destabilized aperture. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the aperture began to contract, its edges pulling inward as the Disruptor's interference pattern disrupted its expansion. "It's working!" she cried, her 4 eyes wide with hope. But Maxoth wasn't finished. Breaking free from Captain Drelks' grasp, he staggered toward the stabilization matrix. "No! I won't be denied transcendence!" He began inputting commands into the system, attempting to counteract the Disruptor's effect. Admiral Blackwell, seeing the danger, disengaged from Reynolds and charged toward the High Counselor. "Allura, get clear!" he ordered as he tackled Maxoth away from the controls. The two ancient enemies grappled at the very edge of the contracting aperture, each fighting for control of a future neither might live to see. Around them, reality itself buckled and warped, caught between the opposing forces of expansion and collapse. "This ends now, Maxoth," Blackwell declared, forcing the High Counselor closer to the fluctuating edge of the aperture. 700 years of manipulation, of playing God with countless lives. It ends here. "You understand nothing," Maxoth raged, his ancient composure completely shattered. "I've seen beyond the veil. What awaits us is glorious beyond comprehension." "Then go experience it yourself," the Admiral replied grimly, and with a final effort pushed Maxoth into the contracting tear in reality. The High Counselor's scream transcended normal sound as he was drawn into the dimensional aperture, his physical form distorting and unraveling as it was consumed by the very transcendence he had sought for millennia. Admiral Blackwell staggered back, but he was too close to the collapsing anomaly. The gravity well of the contracting aperture caught him, pulling him inexorably toward the same fate as Maxoth. "Admiral!" Allura cried, instinctively moving to help him. "Stay back!" he ordered, fighting against the pull with diminishing strength. "Complete the collapse sequence. That's an order." Their eyes met across the distorted space between them, 4 alien eyes and 2 human ones, united in the understanding of necessary sacrifice. Allura nodded once, turned back to the controls, and finalized the collapse sequence. The aperture contracted further, pulling Admiral Blackwell and the remains of Maxoth deeper into its swirling vortex. As the Admiral was drawn past the event horizon, he smiled, a strangely peaceful expression in the midst of cosmic chaos. Before he too was gone. The Disruptor reached full power, its quantum interference pattern creating a cascading collapse that forced the aperture to implode upon itself. With a final reality-bending convulsion, the tear snapped closed, leaving behind nothing but a fading echo of distortion. The silence that followed was deafening. 3 weeks later, Elora stood at the viewport of Captain Drelx's ship, watching as the human fleet prepared to depart. The aftermath of what was now being called the Axiom Crisis had been chaotic but ultimately constructive. With Maxoth gone and his conspirators exposed, the Galactic Council had been forced to confront centuries of manipulation and hidden history. "It's still hard to believe," said Zaktal, joining her at the viewport. "Humans were real all along. And they saved us all." "At great cost," Elora replied softly, thinking of Admiral Blackwell and the others who had sacrificed themselves to close the aperture. Captain Drelx approached, her tentacles arranged in a pattern that conveyed both authority and thoughtfulness. "The Council has voted unanimously to end the quarantine. Diplomatic relations with the United Solar Federation will officially resume next month." "And the humans who sided with Maxoth?" Dr. Verex asked, joining their small gathering. "Most have surrendered and accepted rehabilitation," Captain Drelx explained. "A few extremists fled to the outer systems, but without Maxoth's leadership, the Transcendence movement is expected to fade." Lieutenant Commander Ketek, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since the battle, finally spoke. "And what about us? What happens to those who know the truth?" Captain Drelx's skin rippled with amusement. "We've been appointed as the official first contact delegation. Apparently, our unique experience makes us ideally suited to facilitate human integration into galactic society." "Integration?" Zekatal fluttered his wings in surprise. "I thought they'd want to maintain their independence after centuries of isolation." "That was Admiral Blackwell's preference," Captain Drelx acknowledged. "But the new human leadership sees value in closer ties. They've been alone for a very long time." Elora turned her attention back to the viewport, where the sleek human vessels were executing precise formation maneuvers in preparation for departure. One ship in particular drew her eye, the Intrepid, now under the command of Captain Kowalski. As if sensing her gaze, a communication request chimed at the nearest console. Captain Drelx activated it, and Captain Kowalski's face appeared on screen. "Captain Drelx," she greeted formally. "We're completing final preparations for return to Federation space. I wanted to extend my personal thanks to you and your crew for your courage and assistance." "The gratitude is mutual, Captain Kowalski," Drelx replied. "Without humanity's intervention, the galaxy as we know it would no longer exist." Kowalski's expression softened slightly. "Admiral Blackwell believed our species had a shared destiny. I think he'd be pleased with how things have turned out, despite—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. "Despite the sacrifices," Captain Drelx completed for her. "Yes, I believe he would." After exchanging formal farewells, the communication ended. The gathered officers watched as the human fleet activated their advanced propulsion systems and accelerated away, leaving behind a trail of exotic particles that would fascinate Council scientists for decades to come. "So," Zaktal said eventually, "I guess I was wrong about humans being just bedtime stories." "Spectacularly wrong," Elora agreed with a gentle wing flutter of amusement. "In fairness," Verex offered, "the reality proved far more interesting than the legends." Captain Drelx turned from the viewport to face her crew. "And now we get to help write the next chapter of that reality. The Council has authorized a comprehensive historical revision project, with archivist Elora taking the lead." All eyes turned to Elora, who blinked in surprise. "Me? But I'm just a survey ship's archivist." "Not anymore," Captain Drelx informed her. "You've been promoted to Chief Historical Liaison for Human Galactic Relations. Your first task is to integrate the true history of the Cataclysm, the Quarantine, and the Axiom Crisis into the official Council records." Elora's wings fluttered with a mixture of pride and trepidation. "That's a significant responsibility." "One you've more than earned," Lieutenant Commander Ketek stated firmly. "You faced down the end of existence itself. I think you can handle some historical revisions." As her crewmates offered congratulations and support, Elora found herself looking back at the stars where the human fleet had disappeared. For centuries, her people had dismissed humans as mere legends, fairy tales to frighten hatchlings. Now they stood revealed not just as real, but as saviors, complex, contradictory beings capable of both tremendous self-interest and extraordinary sacrifice. "Chief Historical Liaison," she murmured, testing the title. It felt right somehow. After all, someone needed to ensure the galaxy remembered not just that humans existed, but how they had changed everything. And perhaps, she thought with a flutter of optimism, this was just the beginning. The quarantine was lifted. The barriers between species were falling. Who knew what new chapters might be written in the great galactic archive? Whatever came next, one thing was certain. It would be far more interesting than bedtime stories. Throughout the vast expanse of Council space, Beings of all species gathered around view screens and holographic projectors as the news spread. Humans were real. They had emerged from the legendary quarantine zone to save the galaxy from a threat few had even known existed. In schools, teachers hurriedly revised their lesson plans to include the true history being released by the Council. In military academies, tacticians pored over reports of human technology and combat techniques. In scientific institutions, researchers began the exciting work of integrating 700 years of parallel development. And in a small bar on a far-flung space station, a grizzled Phyrexian veteran raised his glass in a toast. "To Admiral Blackwell," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly hushed establishment, "who proved once and for all that humans aren't just legends." The diverse crowd joined the toast, many still processing the revelations of recent weeks. As glasses clinked and drinks were consumed, conversations turned to the future. A future that now included a species most had believed to be mythical. "They thought humans were legends," someone commented, "until their fleet arrived." "Humanity, fuck yeah," a translator rendered from an obscure alien dialect, creating a moment of confusion before understanding dawned. It was, by all accounts, just the beginning. And somewhere, beyond the veil between dimensions, in a realm of pure energy and limitless potential, two consciousnesses continued their ancient struggle. One seeking domination, the other protection. Neither entirely human nor alien anymore, but eternal guardians of the boundary between transcendence and existence. The battle for reality's future was over. For now, the end. "You actually believe in humans?" Zekatal fluttered his vestigial wings in what passed for laughter among the Shindari. His iridescent scales caught the dim light of the observation deck as he took another sip of fermented mineral water. "I'm telling you, I've seen the records!" Elora insisted, her four eyes blinking in rapid succession, a sign of her mounting frustration. "The Council has been hiding them for centuries." "Right. And I'm the Emperor of the Seven Moons," Zekatal snorted, his tail swishing with amusement. "Come on, Elora. Humans are just bedtime stories we tell hatchlings to make them behave. Finish your nutrient paste or the humans will come and make you eat something called vegetables." Lieutenant Commander Keetak, who had been quietly nursing his drink at the far end of the bar, finally spoke up. "Actually, there might be something to the legends." The observation deck fell silent. When Keetak spoke, people listened. The grizzled Phyrexian had seen more of the galaxy than most of the crew combined. His leathery face, scarred from countless battles, turned toward them with an unsettling seriousness. "My great-grandmother was part of the last diplomatic expedition to the Orion Spur before the quarantine was imposed," he said, his gravelly voice barely above a whisper. "She never spoke much about it, but sometimes, after too much Centaurian brandy, she'd mention beings who stood on two legs and built civilizations without psionics or hive intelligence." "That's impossible," said Dr. Verex, the ship's xenobiologist. "No species could achieve spaceflight without either telepathic coordination or a collective consciousness. The computational requirements alone would—" "Excuse me, honored crew members," interrupted the ship's AI, its holographic form materializing at the center of the lounge. "But I'm detecting an unusual energy signature approaching from the direction of the quarantine zone." Zekatal nearly choked on his drink. "The quarantine zone? No one's been stupid enough to go near there since— Alert! Multiple objects emerging from FTL." The AI's normally calm voice rose an octave. "Configuration unknown. They're heading directly toward us." Captain Drelks burst onto the observation deck, her tentacles writhing with tension. "Battle stations. All non-essential personnel. Return to your quarters immediately." Elora, being the ship's archivist, reluctantly pushed away from the bar. But curiosity got the better of her, and she lingered by the massive viewport, watching as dozens of sleek, metallic vessels decelerated into normal space less than 1,000 kilometers away. "They're hailing us," announced the communications officer, a gelatinous Melvian whose translucent body pulsed with nervous light patterns. "On screen," Captain Drelks ordered, her voice steady despite the circumstances. The view screen flickered, and there it was, a face unlike any they had seen before. No scales, no tentacles, no exoskeleton. Just smooth, bare skin in various shades of beige and brown, with bizarre fur-like growth on the top and occasionally around the lower part of the face. 2 eyes, 1 mouth, 2 strange fleshy protrusions on the sides of its head. "Greetings from Earth and the United Solar Federation," the creature said in perfect galactic standard. "I'm Admiral Donovan Blackwell. Sorry for the, dramatic entrance, but we've been trying to make contact for decades. You folks have been pretty determined to ignore us." The observation deck erupted in chaos. Ziktal fainted, his wings fluttering weakly as he collapsed onto the deck plates. Dr. Varex was frantically scanning the screen with her instruments, muttering, "Impossible, impossible," over and over. And Elora simply smiled. "I told you so," she whispered. The diplomatic reception was hastily arranged in Cargo Bay 3, the only space large enough to accommodate both the ship's senior staff and the delegation from the human vessels. Captain Drelks had insisted on following full diplomatic protocol, which meant everyone was dressed in their ceremonial attire, a decision most were regretting as they sweated under layers of formal garments. Elora, as ship's archivist, had been granted permission to attend, ostensibly to document this historic meeting. In reality, she could barely contain her excitement. Humans! Real actual humans! She'd spent her entire academic career studying the fragmentary references to them in ancient texts, piecing together their mysterious disappearance from galactic affairs nearly 700 years ago. The cargo bay door slid open, and the human delegation entered. There were 5 of them, each different in appearance but unmistakably of the same species. They walked with a confident ease that seemed almost predatory to many of the gathered aliens. Admiral Blackwell led the group, his dark skin contrasting with the silver of his uniform. Behind him strode a shorter human with paler skin and red fur on top of its head, followed by 2 more that appeared to be somewhere in between in coloration. The 5th human was noticeably different, taller, with a build that seemed more slender, yet somehow stronger, with longer fur cascading down to its shoulders. "Captain Drelks," Admiral Blackwell said, extending a 5-digited appendage. "Thank you for hosting us." The captain hesitated, then extended one of her tentacles in return. "The pleasure is ours, Admiral. Though I must admit, your appearance has caused quite a stir." "Yeah, we tend to have that effect," the Admiral chuckled. "Allow me to introduce my team. Commander Winters, our Chief Science Officer, Lieutenant Kowalski, Tactical, Lieutenant Zhao, Communications, and Dr. Ndidi, our xenoanthropologist." Dr. Ndidi stepped forward, her eyes bright with interest. "We've been studying your civilization for generations, Captain. It's extraordinary to finally meet face to face." Captain Drelks' skin mottled with confusion, a Phyrexian expression of surprise. "You've been studying us? But the quarantine has been in effect for centuries. No signals or ships have penetrated that region of space since the Great Collapse." Dr. Ndidi smiled. "That's not entirely accurate." The reception had moved to a more comfortable setting in the ship's conference room, where the humans and aliens sat around a large, crescent-shaped table. Dr. Ndidi had taken center stage, activating a holographic display with a casual wave of her hand, a technology that made several of the alien scientists exchange meaningful glances. "The quarantine, as you call it, was actually our idea," she explained, projecting a map of the galaxy with the Orion spur highlighted. 700 years ago, humanity had just begun to establish colonies beyond our solar system when we encountered the Galactic Confederation. "Confederation?" Captain Drelks interrupted. "There is no record of such an organization in our archives." Elora cleared her throat. "Actually, Captain, there are some obscure references in the pre-council texts. I always assumed they were mistranslations." Dr. Ndidi nodded appreciatively at Elora. "The initial contact was problematic. Your predecessors were in the middle of a massive civil war, using technologies that were destabilizing the fabric of space-time itself. Humanity was caught in the crossfire." Images flashed across the holographic display, ancient space battles, imploding stars, and rips in the very fabric of reality. "We were nearly wiped out," Admiral Blackwell continued, his voice solemn. "Earth itself was targeted in what we now call the Cataclysm. 3 billion humans died in a single day." A heavy silence fell over the room. Even Zikatal, who had been openly skeptical, seemed subdued by the gravity of the Admiral's words. "The survivors retreated to our most distant colonies," Dr. Ndidi went on. "We made a decision. We would withdraw from galactic affairs, establish a buffer zone, your quarantine, and rebuild in secret. Meanwhile, we would watch and wait." "Wait for what?" Dr. Varex asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her initial shock. Admiral Blackwell's expression hardened slightly. "For your civilization to either destroy itself completely or evolve beyond the conflicts that nearly annihilated us." Captain Drelks' tentacles twisted in what the humans had come to recognize as discomfort. "I assure you, Admiral, the Galactic Council has maintained peace for over 5 centuries. Whatever atrocities were committed by our ancestors—" "With respect, Captain," interjected Commander Winters, speaking for the first time. "We're not here to assign blame for ancient history. We're here because of what's happening now." The Admiral nodded grimly. 3 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected quantum fluctuations consistent with those that preceded the cataclysm. Someone in your galactic council is experimenting with the same technologies that nearly destroyed us both 7 centuries ago. The conference room erupted into chaos. Captain Drelks demanded evidence. Dr. Varex argued the physical impossibility of the humans' claims, and Lieutenant Commander Keetak simply sat back, nodding as if he'd known this all along. "Silence!" bellowed the Admiral, his voice cutting through the cacophony with surprising force. The room fell quiet immediately, every alien eye or sensory organ fixed on him. "We didn't cross the quarantine zone and reveal ourselves on a whim," he continued, his tone level but intense. "Humanity has been content to remain in isolation, rebuilding our civilization, developing our technology, and exploring the vast regions of space away from the Council's territory. But this threat cannot be ignored." Elora, who had been furiously taking notes, suddenly looked up. "The Axiom Project," she whispered. All heads turned toward her. "The what now?" Lieutenant Kowalski asked, leaning forward with interest. "The Axiom Project," Elora repeated, louder this time. "It's classified, but as archivist, I have access to Council communications. There have been references to something called Axiom for the past year, always in encrypted messages between High Counselor Maxoth and the Military Research Division." Captain Drelks' skin darkened to a deep purple, a sign of anger or alarm. "Archivist Elora, accessing classified Council communications is a serious violation of—" "Oh, put a tentacle in it, Captain," Keetak interrupted, surprising everyone. "If these humans are right, we've got bigger problems than protocol violations." Dr. Ndidi exchanged a quick glance with Admiral Blackwell, who gave a subtle nod. "The quantum fluctuations we detected originated from a research facility in the Cygnus X system," she said, bringing up new data on the holographic display. "Our intelligence suggests it's being operated by a faction within your council that believes they've discovered the key to unlimited power." "Cygnus X, that's inside the restricted zone," Captain Drelks protested. "No ships are permitted there except by direct council authorization." "Which explains why nobody's noticed what they're up to," Lieutenant Zhao pointed out. Skital, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly perked up. "Hold on, if this is true, why come to us? We're just a survey vessel. Shouldn't you be taking this to the Council directly?" Admiral Blackwell's expression grew somber. "We tried. 3 diplomatic ships approached Council space through official channels. None returned." The implications hung heavy in the air. "We need your help," Commander Winters said simply. "Your ship, your crew, your knowledge of current Council protocols and defenses. We can't stop this alone. And if we don't stop it, everything ends," Admiral Blackwell finished. "Not just humanity this time. Everything." Captain Drelks paced the length of her private quarters, her tentacles twisting in agitation. The human delegation had returned to their ship to allow the alien crew time to process the information and come to a decision. "Captain's log supplemental," she dictated. "I am faced with an impossible choice. If the humans are telling the truth, then High Counselor Maxoth is secretly developing weapons that could threaten all life in the galaxy. If they are lying—" She paused, considering the alternative. Why would an advanced civilization fabricate such an elaborate ruse? The humans could have destroyed their ship the moment they emerged from FTL if conquest was their aim. Her door chime sounded. "Enter!" she called. Elora stepped inside, clutching a data crystal. "Captain, I've been reviewing our long-range sensor logs from the past 6 months. And there are anomalies that correlate with the humans' claims. Bursts of unusual radiation from the Cygnus sector. Gravitational distortions that shouldn't be possible. I dismissed them as instrument errors at the time. But now—" Captain Drelks sighed, a sound like air escaping from multiple vents. "So you believe them?" "I do," Elora said firmly. "And there's more. I've been cross-referencing historical records with what Dr. Ndidi told us. The Great Collapse, the formation of the Council, the quarantine. It all aligns with their version of events, not ours." "What are you saying, Archivist?" "I'm saying our history has been edited, Captain. Deliberately." The captain was silent for a long moment. "If you're right, we're talking about a conspiracy spanning centuries. The implications are—" "Terrifying," Elora finished. "Yes, but also clarifying." Captain Drelks moved to her viewport, gazing out at the human fleet floating serenely against the backdrop of stars. "Assemble the senior staff," she said finally. "I've made my decision." The joint briefing aboard the human flagship Intrepid was tense but productive. Captain Drelks had committed her ship and crew to the mission, though not without conditions. They would attempt to gather evidence and, if possible, confront the Council through legal channels before resorting to military action. Admiral Blackwell had agreed, though the humans' patience was clearly wearing thin after centuries of self-imposed exile. Now, in the intrepid Strategic Command Center, officers from both species huddled around a three-dimensional tactical display of the Cygnus X system. "The research facility is here," Lieutenant Kowalski explained, highlighting a moon orbiting the system's fifth planet. "Heavily defended, both by conventional weapons and some very unconventional ones." "Define unconventional," Lieutenant Commander Keetak asked, his leathery brow furrowed. "Localized time distortions, zero-point energy fields, quantum entanglement disruption systems. Basically, very nasty stuff that shouldn't exist," Commander Winters replied. "Our ships are equipped with countermeasures, but they're experimental at best." Dr. Varix, who had evolved from skeptic to reluctant believer, studied the schematics with professional interest. "These defenses, the technology is far beyond anything the Council publicly acknowledges possessing. Which is precisely why we need to expose this operation," Captain Drelk said firmly. "Whatever Maxoth is developing, he's doing it without full Council approval. That gives us leverage." "Assuming anyone on the Council is willing to listen," Zektal muttered. Elora, who had been granted special permission to participate due to her historical knowledge, suddenly straightened. "What about Councillor Tapraxi? She's always been an advocate for transparency and has publicly questioned Maxoth's increased military spending." Admiral Blackwell exchanged glances with Captain Drelks. "Can she be trusted?" "As much as anyone on the Council," Drelks replied. "She represents the Philosophical Consortium, a coalition of species dedicated to the advancement of ethical governance. If anyone would listen, it's her." "So we have a plan," the Admiral nodded. "Captain Drelks' ship will approach the Council hub under normal protocols, requesting an emergency audience with Councillor Tapraxi. Meanwhile, the human fleet will position itself near the Cygnus facility, ready to intervene if diplomacy fails." "And if Tapraxi betrays us?" Keetak asked bluntly. Admiral Blackwell's expression grew hard. "Then humanity's 700-year exile ends with a bang, not a whisper." The plan was proceeding smoothly. Too smoothly, in Elora's opinion. Their ship had been granted expedited clearance to the Council hub, and Councillor Tapraxi had agreed to a private meeting with surprising alacrity. "I don't like it," she whispered to Zaktal as they walked the gleaming corridors of the hub's diplomatic sector. "Since when does a High Councillor agree to meet with a survey ship's captain without questions?" Zaktal, who had volunteered to accompany the diplomatic party despite his initial skepticism about humans, flexed his wings nervously. "Maybe she's been waiting for someone to come forward. Not everyone can be involved in this conspiracy." "Maybe," Elora conceded, though she remained unconvinced. Captain Drelks led their small delegation, her tentacles carefully arranged in the formal presentation pattern required for council meetings. Behind her walked Dr. Varix and Lieutenant Commander Keetak, with Elora and Zekatal bringing up the rear. The doors to Councillor Tapraxi's chambers slid open, revealing a spacious room decorated with philosophical artifacts from a dozen worlds. Tapraxi herself rose to greet them, a tall, willowy being with crystalline features that caught and refracted the light. "Captain Drelks," her melodious voice chimed, "this is an unexpected pleasure. Your message spoke of urgent matters threatening the stability of the Council." Captain Drelks performed the ritual greeting, her tentacles moving in precise patterns. "Counselor, thank you for seeing us. What I'm about to share with you is difficult to explain and even harder to believe." Tapraxi gestured to a collection of seating arrangements designed to accommodate various physiologies. "Please, make yourselves comfortable. In my experience, difficult explanations are best delivered from a position of ease." They settled themselves, and Captain Drelks began the carefully rehearsed briefing, explaining their encounter with the humans, the historical revelations, and finally, the evidence suggesting High Councillor Maxoth's secret weapons program. Throughout the recitation, Tapraxi remained perfectly still, her crystalline features revealing nothing. When Drelks finally finished, the counselor was silent for a long moment. "You have proof of these claims?" she asked eventually. Elora stepped forward, offering a data crystal. "Sensor readings, historical analyses, and coordinates where you can verify the human fleet's presence yourself." Tapraxi accepted the crystal but didn't immediately review it. Instead, she rose and moved to a viewport overlooking the spectacular nebula that housed the council hub. 700 years, she said softly. "All this time we thought the quarantine zone was established to contain some ancient threat, some catastrophic remnant of the Great Collapse. Never did we imagine." She turned back to face them. Do you know what axiom means in the old language before standardization? It translates roughly as inevitable conclusion. Maxoth believes the inevitable conclusion of all life is conflict, that peace is merely an interlude between wars. His project isn't just a weapon, it's his proof. You know about axiom? Dr. Varix gasped. Tapraxi's crystalline face sparkled with what might have been a sad smile. I've suspected for years. Whispers, funding discrepancies, personnel transferring to classified assignments. But suspicion isn't evidence, and Maxoth's influence runs deep. Then you'll help us stop him? Captain Drelks pressed. I will, Tapraxi said, her voice hardening. But not in the way you might expect. Bringing this before the full council would be suicide, literally. Maxoth has too many allies, too many contingencies. She inserted Alora's data crystal into a private terminal, reviewing the contents quickly. These humans, they're remarkable. To survive what they did, rebuild in secret, and now return to prevent history from repeating itself. So what do you suggest? Keetak asked impatiently. Tapraxi's eyes glittered. I suggest, Lieutenant Commander, that we stage a coup. A coup, Admiral Blackwell repeated flatly. She wants us to help overthrow the Galactic Council. The secure communication channel between the Intrepid and Captain Drelks' team crackled with tension. They had returned to their ship immediately after the meeting with Tapraxi, maintaining the pretense of routine resupply while secretly preparing for their next move. Not the entire council, Drelks clarified. Just Maxoth and his inner circle. Tapraxi believes she can rally the moderate factions once we have proof of Axiom's true nature. The Admiral ran a hand through his short hair, a human gesture of frustration that fascinated Alora. And how exactly does she propose we get this proof? Walk up to the most heavily defended research facility in Council space and ask nicely? Actually, Alora interjected, that's not far off. Tapraxi has given us clearance codes and diplomatic credentials that should get us past the initial security perimeter. She sits on the Oversight Committee for Special Research Initiatives, a position Maxoth arranged to keep her close, not realizing she suspects him. Commander Winters, visible in the background of the transmission, looked skeptical. And once we're inside, these credentials won't get us into the restricted areas where the real work is happening. That's where your technology comes in, Captain Drelks said. Your ships have stealth capabilities beyond anything the Council possesses, correct? Admiral Blackwell nodded reluctantly. We've developed some advancements during our isolation, yes. Then we used Tapraxi's credentials to approach openly with my ship, creating a diplomatic distraction. Meanwhile, a small team from your fleet infiltrates the facility's secure areas. It's risky, Lieutenant Kowalski commented from somewhere off-screen. If they detect our shuttle, they won't, Lieutenant Commander Keetak said with surprising confidence. Because I'll be flying it. All eyes turned to the grizzled Phyrexian. Before I joined this survey mission, I spent 20 years in Council Special Operations, he explained, his scarred face betraying no emotion, including 3 years at the Cygnus facility as security chief, before I started asking too many questions and was reassigned. Admiral Blackwell's eyebrows rose, another fascinating human expression, Alora noted. You're full of surprises, Lieutenant Commander. You have no idea, Keetak replied with a grim smile. I know that facility inside and out, including weaknesses in their detection grid that likely still exist. If anyone can get a team in undetected, it's me. Dr. Ndidi, who had been silently observing, finally spoke up. This could work, Admiral, but we'll need to move quickly. Our latest readings show the quantum fluctuations are increasing in frequency and intensity. Admiral Blackwell nodded decisively. All right, Captain Drelks, prepare your ship for the diplomatic approach. Lieutenant Commander Keetak, you'll lead a joint team. 2 of your crew, 2 of mine. Get in, gather the evidence, get out. And if we encounter resistance? Keetak asked. The Admiral's expression hardened. Then you remind them why humans became legends. The infiltration team gathered in the Intrepid's shuttle bay, making final preparations for their mission. Lieutenant Commander Keetak, having temporarily transferred to the human ship, inspected the specialized equipment with professional thoroughness. This is remarkable, he muttered, examining a device that Commander Winters had called a quantum signature dampener. 700 years of development without interruption has its advantages, replied Lieutenant Kowalski, who had volunteered for the mission despite the Admiral's initial reluctance. The stocky tactical officer checked her sidearm, a sleek, non-metallic weapon that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Dr. Ndidi, the third human on the team, carefully packed a collection of scientific instruments into a specially shielded case. Remember, our primary objective is confirmation and evidence gathering. We need irrefutable proof of what Axiom really is. The fourth member of the infiltration team was, surprisingly, Alora. Her knowledge of council archives and historical context had made her the logical choice, though she had never imagined herself participating in a covert operation. Nervous? Zakatal asked, helping her adjust her equipment harness. He had volunteered as well, but Captain Drelks had insisted he remain with the diplomatic team, where his scientific expertise would seem less suspicious. Terrified, Alora admitted, her four eyes blinking in rapid succession. But also, excited? I've spent my entire career studying history. Now I'm helping make it. Just make sure it's the right kind of history, Zakatal cautioned. Not the "and they were never heard from again" kind. Keetak interrupted their conversation. Final briefing, he announced, gathering the team around a holographic display of the Cygnus facility. Our insertion point is here, a maintenance airlock near the facility's waste reclamation system. Not glamorous, but minimally monitored. The display zoomed in, showing their path through the facility. We'll proceed through these service corridors to the central research hub, Keetak continued. Dr. Ndidi will take readings to confirm the quantum signatures. Alora will access the main archive terminal and download whatever data she can. Kowalski and I will provide security and, if necessary, distraction. What kind of distraction? Alora asked nervously. Kowalski patted her strange weapon. The loud kind. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Dr. Ndidi said firmly. In and out, clean and quiet. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. Admiral Blackwell's voice filled the shuttle bay. Infiltration team, Captain Drelks' ship has been cleared for approach to the Cygnus facility. You launch in 5 minutes. May luck and skill be with you. Keetak checked his chronometer and nodded to his team. Let's move. As they boarded the sleek black shuttle, Alora whispered a traditional Shindari prayer for protection. Somehow, she doubted the ancient gods of her people had ever anticipated this particular scenario. Captain Drelks' diplomatic approach to the Cygnus facility proceeded with suspicious smoothness. Their credentials from Counselor Tapraxi opened doors that should have remained firmly closed to a mere survey vessel. They're escorting us directly to the administrative sector, Zakatal murmured as they followed their guide, a stern-faced security officer with the insignia of Maxoth's personal guard. That's unusual. Indeed, Captain Drelks replied quietly. Be prepared for anything. They were led into a spacious conference room overlooking the facility's sprawling complex. Through the viewport, they could see research buildings, power generation stations, and defensive installations spread across the moon's barren surface. Director Venn will join you shortly, their escort announced before departing, the door sliding shut behind him with an ominous hiss. Director Venn? Dr. Varix whispered once they were alone. Tapraxi's intelligence indicated that Overseer Krax was in charge of this facility. Perhaps there's been a recent change in leadership, Captain Drelks suggested, though her tentacles twisted with concern. The door slid open again, revealing not the expected Director Venn, but a tall, imposing figure that made Captain Drelks' skin blanch to a pale blue. High Counselor Maxoth himself. Captain Drelks, he intoned, his voice a deep resonance that seemed to bypass their ears and vibrate directly in their minds. What an unexpected pleasure. Maxoth was an Eldrathi, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His elongated head housed 3 brains, his 6-fingered hands were renowned for their precision, and his dark, pupilless eyes seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. High Counselor, Captain Drelks managed, performing a hasty ceremonial greeting. We weren't expecting such a distinguished reception. No, I imagine not, Maxoth replied smoothly. Just as I wasn't expecting a minor survey vessel to approach my most secure research facility with diplomatic credentials from Counselor Tapraxi. He tilted his head slightly. Credentials she never issued. Captain Drelks felt her secondary heart stutter. I don't understand, sir. The credentials were verified by your own security systems. Of course they were. Maxoth smiled, revealing teeth too sharp for a supposedly evolved being. How else would I lure you and your real mission into my grasp? The infiltration shuttle, using technology that bent light and other electromagnetic radiation around its hull, slipped undetected through a gap in the facility's sensor network. A gap that Keetak insisted would be there, and was. Told you, he grunted as they drifted silently toward the maintenance airlock. Maxoth's arrogance is his weakness. He never believed anyone would dare infiltrate his precious project, so he never bothered fixing the blind spots I identified years ago. Lieutenant Kowalski at the shuttle's controls smiled grimly. Arrogance is the universal constant, regardless of species. They docked with practiced precision, the shuttle's specialized airlock creating a perfect seal with the rarely used maintenance port. Within minutes, they were inside the facility, moving through narrow service tunnels that reeked of chemical waste and recycled air. Charming, Dr. Ndidi murmured, her handheld scanner sweeping ahead of them. But effective for our purposes. These tunnels are shielded from internal sensors to prevent false readings from maintenance bots. Elora, bringing up the rear, tried to focus on their mission rather than the claustrophobic confines or the occasional skittering sounds that suggested they weren't entirely alone in these forgotten passages. 200 meters ahead, we'll reach a junction, Keetak informed them. From there, we split up. Kowalski and I will secure the path to the emergency extraction point, while you two head for the central research hub. Alone? Elora squeaked, her wings fluttering nervously despite her best efforts to remain calm. Dr. Ndidi gave her a reassuring smile. We'll be fine. The smaller the group, the less likely we are to be detected. Besides, my scanner will warn us of any approaching personnel. They reached the junction, and after a brief equipment check, separated as planned. Elora followed Dr. Ndidi through a series of increasingly narrow passages, eventually emerging through a maintenance panel into what appeared to be a standard storage room. We're in the secondary research wing, Dr. Ndidi whispered, consulting a holographic map projected from her wrist device. The central hub should be 2 levels up. They carefully made their way through the facility, avoiding the occasional staff member with the help of Dr. Ndidi's scanner. The human's confidence was infectious, and Elora found herself growing bolder with each successful evasion. But as they approached the central research hub, Dr. Ndidi suddenly froze, her scanner emitting a soft but urgent beep. That's not right, she muttered, adjusting the device's settings. These readings, they're off the scale. Is it the weapon? Elora asked, peering over the human's shoulder at the incomprehensible data. Dr. Ndidi shook her head slowly, her expression grave. No, it's much worse than that. It's not a weapon at all. It's a tear in the fabric of reality itself. I don't know what you're implying, High Counselor, Captain Drelk said, struggling to maintain her diplomatic composure. We're here on a routine inspection authorized by the Council's Research Oversight Committee, which Counselor Tapraxi chairs. Maxoth's smile didn't reach his dark eyes. A clever alibi. Tapraxi does indeed chair that committee, a position I arranged for her precisely because it would seem legitimate if she ever became troublesome. He moved to the viewport, gesturing at the facility spread out below them. Tell me, Captain, did you really think I wouldn't notice when a fleet of unidentified vessels emerged from the quarantine zone? Vessels with technology far beyond our own, crewed by beings from ancient legends. The diplomatic team exchanged alarmed glances. Oh yes, Maxoth continued, turning back to face them. I know about your human allies. I've known about them for centuries. That's impossible, Dr. Varix blurted. The quarantine has been a convenient fiction, Maxoth interrupted. A boundary beyond which the Council agreed not to venture, ostensibly to contain some ancient threat. The truth, of course, is far more interesting. He touched a control panel, and a holographic display flickered to life, showing images that made Zekatal gasp audibly. Humans, in earlier versions of their current uniforms, meeting with Maxoth himself, 700 years younger but unmistakable. You see, Captain, the humans didn't withdraw from galactic affairs because they feared us. They withdrew because I offered them a deal. In the central research hub, Elora and Dr. Ndidi crouched behind a row of equipment, observing the pulsating tear in reality that dominated the center of the vast chamber. Scientists of various species moved purposefully around complex machinery, all focused on the shimmering anomaly that seemed to both exist and not exist simultaneously. What is it? Elora whispered, her 4 eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fascination. Dr. Ndidi's face was grim as she took readings with her scanner. It's a dimensional aperture, a doorway between our universe and somewhere else. The quantum fluctuations we detected weren't from a weapon being developed. They were bleed-through from whatever is on the other side.
Hey.
But why? What possible reason could Maxoth have for power? Dr. Ndidi interrupted softly. Unlimited power. The energy differential between our dimension and others could, theoretically, be harnessed. But the risks. She shook her head. It's what destroyed our world 7 centuries ago. The cataclysm wasn't a weapon. It was a dimensional tear that grew unstable and collapsed, releasing energy equivalent to thousands of supernovae. Elora felt sick. And they're doing it again? Knowingly? I need to get closer readings, Dr. Ndidi said, ignoring the question. And you need to access that terminal. She pointed to a workstation partially hidden behind a partition. Download everything you can about Project Axiom. We need to understand exactly what they're trying to do here. They separated, each moving with careful precision through the busy research hub. Most of the scientists were too absorbed in their work to notice an extra person here or there, and Dr. Ndidi's stealth technology rendered her nearly invisible to casual observation. Elora reached the terminal and, with trembling fingers, inserted a data spike, human technology that bypassed Council security protocols with disturbing ease. As data began flowing into the storage device, she scanned the visible files, her archivist training allowing her to quickly catalog and prioritize the information. What she found turned her blood cold. "A deal?" Captain Drelks repeated, her voice steady despite the shock rippling through her body. "What kind of deal?" Maxoth's expression was almost nostalgic. "A simple one. They would withdraw beyond the Orion Spur, taking their dangerous ideas with them, and I would ensure the newly formed council didn't pursue them. In exchange, they would continue their scientific advancement along certain, specific paths." "Paths you dictated," Zekatal realized, his natural skepticism finally finding a worthy target. "Guided, not dictated," Maxoth corrected. "The humans are remarkably inventive. I merely suggested areas of research that would benefit us both." "Us both?" Captain Drelks questioned, her tentacles rigid with tension. "Or just you, Counselor?" Maxoth's smile widened. "Perceptive, Captain. Yes, primarily me. You see, the Council, for all its grand ideals of unity and cooperation, is fundamentally flawed. It perpetuates the illusion of advancement while maintaining a steady state of controlled equilibrium. No true innovation, no dramatic leaps forward, just stagnation dressed as stability." He moved closer to them, his ancient eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "But I have a grander vision. A galaxy united not by committees and compromises, but by transcendence. Beyond biology, beyond technology, beyond the very constraints of our dimension." "You're insane," Dr. Verex whispered. "I am visionary," Maxoth countered calmly, "and after 700 years of preparation, that vision is about to become reality. The humans have fulfilled their part admirably, developing the theoretical framework and initial technology. Now, Project Axiom will complete what began during the Great Collapse." "You caused the collapse," Captain Drelks accused, the pieces finally falling into place. "It wasn't a civil war. It was your first attempt at whatever this is." "My first attempt, yes," Maxoth acknowledged with a slight nod. "Premature, as it turned out. The humans' unexpected arrival complicated matters, and the resulting disaster forced me to recalibrate my approach. More subtlety, more preparation." "But why involve them at all?" Zekatal demanded. "If they nearly ruined your plans before." "Because, my scaled friend, humans possess something unique among all the species we've encountered. Technological innovation without collective consciousness. They advance without the limiting factor of consensus. One human genius can pursue an idea that millions of their fellows would reject as dangerous or unethical. It makes them unpredictable, chaotic, and invaluable." Captain Drelks' mind raced. If what Maxoth was saying was true, then the human fleet wasn't here to stop a rogue weapon. They were here to complete one. But that contradicted everything she'd seen in Admiral Blackwell and his crew. Their genuine concern, their determination to prevent another catastrophe. Unless that too was part of the deception. "So the humans approaching us, revealing themselves after centuries, that was part of your plan?" she asked, trying to buy time while she sorted through the implications. "Of course," Maxoth said smoothly. "Though I confess I expected them to approach the Council directly. Your involvement was an interesting variation. A useful one, as it turned out. Tapraxi has grown suspicious over the years, but she trusted you implicitly." "Trusted?" Captain Drelks caught the past tense immediately. Maxoth's expression turned regretful. "I'm afraid Counselor Tapraxi suffered a sudden health crisis this morning. Quite tragic. The Council will, of course, honor her memory with appropriate ceremonies." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Tapraxi was dead, presumably murdered on Maxoth's orders. They were alone, without allies, in the heart of his operation. And somewhere in the facility, Elora and the infiltration team were walking into a trap. Lieutenant Kowalski checked her chronometer for the third time in as many minutes. "They should have made contact by now," she muttered, her hand never straying far from her weapon. Lieutenant Commander Keetak, who had been maintaining a stoic silence, finally spoke. Something's wrong. The security patrols are too regular, too precise. This facility is on high alert, but they're trying not to show it. They were positioned near their planned extraction point, a rarely used cargo bay that Keetak insisted would provide the quickest escape route if needed. So far, they'd encountered no resistance, which was itself becoming suspicious. We need to warn them, Kowalski decided, reaching for her communicator. Keetak's hand shot out, grasping her wrist with surprising strength. No, any transmission might be detected. We stick to the plan. Kowalski's eyes narrowed. Since when does a career military officer put blind adherence to a plan above tactical adaptability? Since that officer spent 20 years in Council Special Operations learning when to follow orders and when to improvise, Keetak retorted, his scarred face impassive. They stared at each other for a tense moment before Kowalski slowly lowered her hand. Fine, but if they're not here in 10 minutes, I'm going after them, with or without you. Keetak seemed about to respond when a distant alarm began to sound, its pulsing wail echoing through the facility's corridors. Perimeter breach, he translated, his expression darkening. They've been spotted. Kowalski was already moving, her weapon drawn. So much for the plan. Let's go get our people. No, 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 Elora whispered, her voice rising with each repetition as she scanned through the files. This can't be right. The data flowing across the terminal painted a picture more horrifying than she could have imagined. Project Axiom wasn't just about creating a dimensional aperture. It was about widening it until it consumed the entire galaxy. According to Maxoth's private logs, what lay beyond the tear wasn't another dimension in the conventional sense. It was a realm of pure energy, uninhabitable by any biological life form but capable of sustaining a consciousness that had been prepared. Maxoth intended to upload his consciousness into this energy realm, becoming a being of pure thought and limitless power. The cost would be the complete dissolution of the physical universe as the dimensional tear expanded exponentially. Genocide on a cosmic scale. And the humans. The logs mentioned them repeatedly, but not as unwitting pawns, as partners. A soft chime from the data spike indicated the download was complete. Elora removed it with shaking hands, desperate to find Dr. Ndidi and share what she'd discovered. But as she turned, she found herself face to face with a security officer, his weapon aimed directly at her head. "Don't move," he growled. Across the research hub, alarms began to sound as Dr. Ndidi was similarly surrounded by security personnel. The scientists scattered, securing their equipment and data as the facility went into lockdown. Elora's wings fluttered uselessly as panic threatened to overwhelm her. They'd failed. They'd been caught. And if Maxoth's files were accurate, the entire galaxy was doomed. Dr. Ndidi maintained a calm demeanor despite the weapons pointed at her from multiple directions. Her scanner, still clutched in her hand, continued taking readings of the dimensional aperture, transmitting the data via quantum entanglement to a receiver on the Intrepid, a failsafe she'd activated the moment they entered the research hub. "Well, this is awkward," she remarked to the security team surrounding her. "I don't suppose we could discuss this like rational beings." "Silence," barked the lead officer, a burly Thanarian with cybernetic enhancements visible beneath his uniform. "You will be escorted to containment until High Counselor Maxoth determines your fate." Dr. Ndidi sighed dramatically. "That's what I was afraid of. In that case..." She pressed a concealed button on her scanner, which emitted a blinding flash and a burst of localized EMP that temporarily disabled the security team's weapons and visual implants. In the ensuing confusion, she ducked low and sprinted toward Elora, who was being marched toward an exit by her lone captor. With precision born of extensive training, Dr. Ndidi executed a sweeping kick that sent the officer crashing to the floor, his weapon clattering away. "Run!" she shouted to Elora, grabbing the archivist's arm and pulling her toward the nearest emergency exit. They burst through the door into a maintenance corridor just as the facility's alarms shifted from perimeter breach to full intruder alert. The pulsing red lights and wailing siren created a disorienting environment, but Dr. Ndidi seemed unaffected, leading them unerringly through the maze-like passages. "The data!" she gasped as they ran. "Did you get it?" Elora clutched the data spike tightly. "Yes, but it's not what we thought. Maxoth is trying to destroy the entire galaxy and your people." "Not now," Dr. Ndidi interrupted as they rounded a corner and nearly collided with Lieutenant Kowalski and Keetak, who had their weapons drawn and ready. "There you are," Kowalski exclaimed. "We need to move. The whole facility is locking down." "The shuttle?" Dr. Ndidi asked as they resumed their sprint toward the extraction point. Keetak's expression was grim. "Compromised. We need an alternative." I have one, Dr. Ndidi replied, tapping a sequence into her wrist device. Admiral Blackwell anticipated we might need a more dramatic exit. On my signal, the Intrepid will create a diversion. We just need to reach the eastern exterior maintenance hatch. They changed direction, Keetak taking point with his superior knowledge of the facility's layout. As they navigated the increasingly chaotic corridors, Elora tried to make sense of what she'd read in Maxoth's files. Dr. Ndidi, she panted. The data indicates your people are working with Maxoth, not against him. Is that true? The human scientist didn't break stride. It's complicated. Some humans may have been compromised over the centuries. Maxoth is persuasive, and 700 years is a long time to maintain unity of purpose. So, Admiral Blackwell is one of the good ones, Dr. Ndidi assured her. There's been an internal conflict brewing within human leadership for decades. Those who want to honor the original mission, preventing another cataclysm, and those who've been seduced by Maxoth's promises of transcendence. They reached a junction where 4 corridors met, only to find security teams approaching from 3 directions. Kowalski and Keetak immediately opened fire, their advanced weapons leaving the security officers stunned but alive. This way, Keetak shouted, leading them down the only clear corridor. The maintenance hatch is just ahead. They burst through a final security door and found themselves in an airlock chamber. Beyond the reinforced viewport lay the barren surface of the moon, its cratered landscape illuminated by the harsh light of the system's distant sun. Keetak moved to the control panel, his fingers flying over the interface. Atmospheric integrity confirmed, preparing for emergency evacuation. Wait, Elora said suddenly, her wings fluttering with distress. What about Captain Drelks and the others? We can't just leave them.